Welcome to the Awesome Marriage Podcast. We are so glad that you're joining us today to talk about how to make your marriage better in the second half than it was before. So, you probably know this already, but there are some really negative cultural beliefs and myths about marriage, like the myth that it will just get boring or stale over time, or the myth that couples are destined to lose their spark over time. Marriage does have some negative stereotypes, but we are here to bust those myths today and give you tips to make your marriage better than before in the second half. So, one way I want to mention to help you do that right off the bat is Dr. Kim's Marriage Multiplier. This is just a quick, brief, and practical weekly email where Dr. Kim sends you some ideas, some challenges, and questions about how to build up your marriage. If you want to make some intentional investments, there is no simpler way than this. So find the link to sign up for the Marriage Multiplier in today's show notes. Let's dive in. So Dr. Kim, you and Nancy just celebrated 55 years.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
I know. That's amazing.
So I would say you're probably in the second half. What do you think?
I think we are. Yeah, it was funny. We went to lunch at a place I guess the day of our anniversary, and then we kind of celebrated for 2 different days. And the place did a great job. They had a little sign on our deal, "Happy 55th" and stuff like that. And so this old busboy comes over about halfway through the meals, and he says, "I'm engaged. Can you tell me how you got to 55 years?"
Wow.
And it was like, so I let Nancy answer. Which, I mean, for us, it's just the commitment and the consistency and putting God first. I mean, which are not easy things to do.
No.
You
No.
have to do it. So I think when I think about second half, and we can talk about it later, the latest book is basically what it's all about, how to prepare for that and to go into it well. But if you kind of think about it, it is kind of hard to define. If you think about a sports game, whether like say soccer, baseball, football. And so if you look at that and you say the time on a game and say a marriage, every game lasted, say 50 years, then the second half of marriage would be the 25 years after your 25th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
That would be assuming most couples make it to 50. They're 50, around 25 when they married. Second half of marriage would begin after their 50th birthday with all that kind of stuff. And if we did that, it'd be so easy just to design stuff. Okay, this is the problem. The problem is that people are all different. And when they enter the second half of marriage, because really, as I did some research on it, only about 10% of the married population would fall into that category. If we got married 25, kids were gone by 50, we ended in the second half of marriage. But I think that what I would say for Nancy and I, it was really when the last child left home. It was kind of like, okay, because as long as kids are home, there's still a lot of stuff you do with the kids, even as teenagers when they're driving and they have their own lives, but still you want to make sure there's food for them. You want to do these kind of things. So you're still doing parenting type stuff and even a little bit of that in college. Both our kids went to schools that were fairly close, so they could be home time. But it really, our life changed them because it was really, they had their own lives responsibilities then. So we didn't really worry about getting home to fix dinner. Didn't have to watch kids do homework or make sure they did homework or that kind of stuff. And so all of a sudden you've got this freedom. And if you haven't laid the groundwork, I think that's where we see so many couples begin to struggle, even divorce at that time. I've had so many college students come in to see me like, I thought my parents were fine. And now they're divorcing. 2 years, I'm in college 2 years. And I think it's because you didn't really nurture your marriage through that time. It's easy to get real kid-centered, and kids are a blessing, but they also are a distraction from a marriage relationship. And so I think that would be when we would say our kids get home. And I think that's kind of the defining point for most couples is at that point. And some people can define it different. Maybe you didn't have kids, so you see that as maybe when you both retire. I know there's other things to do, but looking at it like in probably a typical marriage, have some kids, they grew up and move out. That's when I would say it is. That's kind of a long answer to the question, but that's kind of how I would look at it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, because you've got your seasons in marriage and,
Yes.
we all can relate to that, but it's not really clearly defined there either. You might, you don't really know when your newlywed season is over until you realize, oh, now we're really focusing on our careers or whatever it is, kids. And I think too, I'm at about 21 years of marriage now. And so seeing a lot of people around me, I think you're right. I've seen a lot of couples that are kind of breaking up as the kids are leaving home. And I know, looking at it from where I am, being having my youngest moving on, getting a little older, a little more independent, kind of caused me to reevaluate some, what do I want the next part of my life to look like? And
Right.
and I know I've heard some people say, if you're going to make a change, it's kind of the time, because you don't want to look at the rest of your entire life being something you're not really happy with. And so if your marriage has kind of been teetering, I could see how it would be easy to fall over to one side or another at this stage.
Yeah, I mean, the extreme on that would be like you kind of look at each other and you say, "Okay, now tell me what your name was," or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
But I think it's
Yeah.
almost that way because you just live different lives, and it doesn't.
Mhm.
I think when your kids are active and you're doing stuff with them, you just aren't that aware of the void. You may feel it at
Yeah.
times. Some marriage is really not as good as it should be,
Mhm.
but we're busy, stuff like that.
Mhm.
But then when you don't have the kids to focus on, it is like it's just the two of you. And
Yeah.
nothing's worse, I think, than being in a house with your husband, your wife, and feeling lonely. When that
Mhm.
person that you chose to spend the rest of your life with is in the house with you.
Mhm.
Maybe in a different room, but in the house with you. And
Yeah.
so I think that happens. And then it's kind of like people start thinking all kinds of things. Well, why am I married? And those things. And so
Yeah.
what we want to talk about is the fact that you nurture your marriage all the way through.
Mhm.
And then when the couples that I see that do that, when they come to this stage, it's
Mhm.
like, wow, this is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. So, a minute ago, you did mention your latest book. Will you
Yes.
show the cover for people who are watching on YouTube?
Yes.
So it's
This is, make sure I got it where I can see it.
Love, Intimacy, and
The
Sex in the
second
Second
second half.
Half.
That's
That's great.
top pictures are wedding night,
So
and that
cute.
other picture was a couple years later. So, yeah, and the thing I love about the book is first one Nancy and I did together,
Mhm.
and we really did a lot of just answering questions, recording, and then Lindsay and others helped transcribe it
Mhm.
and put it in a form, and it kind of fit into a book. But it's really our story and kind of things that we've learned and how we feel like we did a pretty good job preparing for the second half.
Mhm.
And so I think that's what I would want for everyone to be able
Yeah.
to go into that stage of life and just think, yeah, there's it's probably a little sadness when the kids finally leave.
Mhm.
But then you kind of, if you keep it like you said, there's different seasons, and when the season starts, it's going to end at some point.
Yeah.
And so if you can look at that and you think, but yeah, we got the freedom that we had before kids,
Mhm.
and and then how do you spend that time together and make that a really rich season of
Mhm.
your marriage and of your life?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So, okay. So we've kind of tried to define as much as we can what's the second half. And again, that's going to be different for every couple, but I think we're getting the good general
Yeah.
idea here. So let's talk about what's different when you get to this stage. What is going to be different in a marriage? Like we're talking about seasons. It's okay that they're different. It, can be a little uncomfortable to get used to, but
Right.
what are the differences you see in your couples that you counsel?
Well, I think the main, thing that we said is kids gone. Now, I've had couples that, maybe a child still lives at home, but
Mhm.
it still is defined different. Like they're maybe getting on their feet and they're
Mhm.
working and they're being responsible. Maybe you don't have quite as much freedom because that child's still at home, but
Mhm.
basically kids are gone. And so I think when we begin to look at it, it was kind of like, what do we want this season to look like?
Mhm.
Because we had seen couples that were older than us, that is season, and disconnect. And we didn't want that to happen for us.
Yeah.
We wanted our love to grow. We wanted to be passionate about each other and the life God has given us after that.
Mhm.
We want our sex life to be better than ever. We knew if those kind of things and connecting weren't just going to happen,
Mhm.
it would take focus, intentionality, and work. But the picture of what we had, of what our marriage could be, I think we saw that was worth it when the kids were still home to make sure we still had date nights and to
Mhm.
do the things that connected us that honestly a lot of times we didn't feel like we had time for, but we
Right.
did. But we made the
Yeah.
time, and that I think that made a difference. So I think the difference comes as you've got this freedom, and what are you gonna do with it?
Yeah.
Yeah, are you
Yeah.
gonna? Is it gonna be something you think, oh my gosh, 10 years into this season, our marriage is better than it's ever been, or it's like we're not doing this anymore, and that's
Mhm.
sad.
Yeah.
And it's sad for your kids. I mean, I've had it,
Mhm.
no matter what a couple gets divorced, it affects the kids. And
Mhm.
I realized that when I had some mid-20s kids come in that parents were divorcing. It's like,
Mhm.
this is not good. They talked
Yeah.
about Christmas is going to be different. We don't want to have two
Yeah.
houses. I don't want to have to deal with a stepmom or stepdad as an
Mhm.
adult,
Yeah.
all those kind of things. So there's a lot of fallout when that happens.
No, that's very real. I mean, and it's like almost at that point, you think that they've made it. You think like, why would you?
Yeah.
Why would you
I
quit
think it just
now?
I think it is a shock because I think usually when, friends that we've had that did struggle after the kids left, but when we were around them and the kids and we'd go to sports stuff together and we'd go eat afterwards and everything, seemed great. But then you stop
Hmm.
thinking and think, oh, all we did was talk about kids,
Right. Oh,
you
right.
know?
Hmm.
And so it can look good, but then it's not happening. It's not
Yeah.
really what it looks like.
That's so true. It's like when you have the date night, and you're like, okay, we need to make a boundary to not talk about the kids and not talk
Yeah,
about work. What are we going to talk about?
which is kind of hard, but
Yeah.
and that's where some of our resources, like so many
Yeah.
questions to ask your spouse and things like that. I mean, okay, put them on your phone, and then
Hmm.
when you sit down at dinner and you don't have anything to do, ask each other questions.
Yeah.
Get some things going, or we try to give you a lot of tools that can
Hmm.
kind of help you over that because I think a lot of people say that. Well, if we
Hmm.
didn't talk about the kids, or we didn't talk about what are we going to talk about? Well,
Right.
what did you talk about? You haven't always had kids. You
Yeah.
did talk about things
Yeah.
before kids,
Yeah. No,
So.
that's true, and that's probably why our creative questions to ask your spouse resources. We have different versions of that. It's like one of our best loved
Yeah,
resources all the time. That's probably why.
I think it is, and
Hmm.
those are just great resources. And there's some
Yeah.
questions that are easy, and some make you think a little longer. But you
Hmm.
you learn about each other, and you get in the habit of communicating, maybe in some different ways. Not always talking
Hmm.
about the kids. I
Hmm.
mean, you got to talk about kids when they're growing up. I mean, you just have to. You got,
Yeah.
but that's not the only thing that you
Yeah.
need to be talking about.
No, that's true. And one other really, really simple resource that you've done a really good job with this, Dr. Kim, is the one thing email. So I mentioned earlier the weekly marriage multiplier,
Right,
but Dr.
right,
Kim writes a daily one thing email to give you one thing to do that day to help improve your marriage. And a lot of days you'll say, ask your spouse this question, ask your spouse these couple of
right.
questions. And so runs the gamut from really topical, practical stuff to just kind of knowing each other, knowing how to support each other. And so if you're not signed up for Dr. Kim's one thing email and you are able to read a daily email without getting totally swamped in your inbox, it's a great way to do something intentional for your marriage.
I think it is. And I've talked to people, guys especially, seem to like it because
Hmm.
guys want to do something for their marriage, but then they get busy and they forget about it and they don't do it. And
Hmm.
that has helped a lot of guys just because they're simple things to do, most of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think the whole idea behind it was to make you think about your marriage every day and
Yeah.
do something good for it. And I know a lot of people that subscribe. We've got, I don't know how many subscribers now, thousands of them.
Yeah. Dozens of thousands. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so they may not read it every day, but it's there every day,
Yeah.
and they can go to it. And so I think it's just a way to kind of get in some really good habits that
Hmm.
will improve your marriage and grow your marriage.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. Yeah. So again, we'll have that linked in the show notes, of course, as well. But with everything on the Awesome Marriage Podcast, we're here not just to talk about things, but to help you actually take action. And so these are just ways that we're tossing in whatever helps you. Take it, run with it, grab it. And if it doesn't, keep listening because we've got more coming. So
Yeah.
let's talk about, we've talked about what the stage is, defined it. So talk about what you see happen in this season, like in couples you counsel. Where are the struggle points? Where are the pain points?
I think it's when you haven't really nurtured your marriage over time.
Hmm.
And sometimes we change during those times too. And
Oh,
if you're
yeah.
not consistently communicating, you don't do that. And so when you've really missed connection for a period of time, and maybe it wasn't the whole 18 years or
Right.
more. I mean, it kind of statistically, if you have your first child and your second and the third and all are 3 years apart, you're parenting for 24 years. You've got a kid in the house for 24 years. That's a
Hmm.
long time. And I mean, if you couldn't do that, but if you put your job on the back burner for 24 years, I mean, what's that going to do? I mean,
Yeah.
and so the most important relationship next to Christ is our marriage. You just can't put it on the back burner for that period of time. And so I think it's the things that would come out of that. It would come of not communicating well. Maybe your sex life has kind of waned. You haven't really taken the time to get it back on track. You're not spending time. Maybe you're not growing spiritually together. Maybe you started out and you were praying together, but then you quit. And so we just didn't get back. You're not resolving conflict. And so you either avoid each other or you blow up and get mad and then never resolve it. All those kind of things that if we're not doing those are going to continue over time. They're going to just kind of, it's kind of like a big iceberg and you just keep
Mm.
chipping at it. You're just
Mhm.
kind of chipping at it. And then all of a sudden there's not much left.
Mhm.
And so I think it's for me, it's when you're not connecting, all these other things it's going to affect all these other things. You're
Yeah.
just not going to feel close or connected. Your sex life
Mhm.
suffers. You quit praying together, all those kind of things because you're not taking the time to be intentional about your
Mhm.
marriage. And so those are where a lot of the problems come from.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a lot of a lack of intentionality, and that's kind of what
Yeah.
you've been alluding to, is that it does take some vision, and that's what you and Nancy, you shared that you guys did. You had a vision of where you wanted to end up, and that's what helped you prioritize date nights and keep doing stuff like that. So, I think it's a really important piece to start with.
I think it is. I think if I look back, when year 7, when we looked at divorce and we
Mhm.
chose to take it off the table, that was a huge step because then it was like, okay, if we're going to take it off the table,
Mhm.
we don't want to be miserable with each other for 50
Mhm.
years. We want to enjoy each other. And so what do we want it to look like? What do we
Mhm.
want it to look like with kids? And then after those kind of things, we kind of always were trying to focus and keep our marriage in front of us. And
Mhm.
I think we both worked together to do that. There were times I could get lax, there were times she would get lax, but together we kept it on track. And I think because of that, we can say with confidence that it made a difference.
Mhm.
We would
Yes.
not have what we have today if we had not done that.
Yeah. Yeah, so having some shared vision is really key here.
Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. If you thought, hey, Brian, did this podcast. Oh my gosh, we got to do this. And Brian
Mhm.
goes, well, I'm not really into that. I mean, you can't do it on your own.
Right.
You got to
No.
both of you have to be a part. And I think when you are and you're encouraging each other, you really grow through that. You really
Yeah.
begin to value the other person. Wow,
Mhm.
they love this marriage. They value this marriage. And when I was kind of off track a little bit, man, he got me back on track or she got me back
Mhm.
on track because I began to see again how valuable this person is in my life. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, it takes both of you working together.
Yeah, I love that too, because I feel like having shared vision, I think for us helps us to appreciate each other's differences, because if we can see that, okay, we're going in the same direction, we value the same things, it's okay that we approach things a little differently because we are very different
Right.
individuals, but it helps us to see we're going in the same direction, even if we can't always be in step with every single decision, you know?
I think that's a really good point. It's embracing those differences,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's what I try to help people see a lot when I talk about, okay, what is your goal, and they can usually agree with the goal. We want to be close.
Yeah.
We want our sex life to be good. We want to
Mm-hmm.
communicate well, and then it's like, okay, how do we get there? Well, that sometimes we get there in different ways, and so
Yeah.
you got to figure out the ways, embrace those differences, and see
Mm-hmm.
those there's value in those, and together with your differences. I mean, it really would be, I think, kind of boring if God put us together and we were the same. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's like there wouldn't be much challenge to that.
Yeah.
And so I think the difference is when we learn to embrace those, they really are, there's so much value in that. And you can
No,
see
that's
what
true.
God's purpose in that because I'm a better person because of Nancy and her differences. And I think she would say the same about me. And sometimes it's hard because sometimes we
Mhm.
don't like those differences. It's like, golly, if they would just change that, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
And and I can still go through that some, and then I think, well, maybe I need to look at it differently, and then pray
Yeah,
about it and ask God to help me reframe it. And
yeah.
He's usually good about doing that.
I feel like there's so much we could say about that because it's making me think about, like, having humility in marriage, which is a Christ-like attribute, and just kind of instead of assuming that, the way I see the world is the way my spouse should see it, that's really prideful, but that's my default. That's what I think naturally. And so, I think that's one cool thing when we're talking about the second half, that kind of a double-edged sword there, that we should get into a little more, but by this point, you know your spouse pretty well. And so there's some
Yeah,
things you know about them that are hard to just accept. They might still drive you crazy. But on the other hand, because you do know them so well, you can work together well. And so you kind of have that choice here. So let's talk about what makes the second half of marriage the perfect time to grow. I mean, I think that just knowing each other well is one thing. What else would you add to that?
Yeah, and I think just being intentional,
Mhm.
committing to be intentional, because like if you were just, well, I'm going to do all these things, even if
Mhm.
Brian doesn't. Well, that's not going to work. I mean, at some point you get resentful,
Yeah.
and you're not going to like that. And so you got to both be committed to being intentional about it. You got
Mhm.
to, there's no shortcut to setting aside time every day
Mhm.
to spend time to each other. And I think one of the things that I've said before in the podcast, but I think it's really important because sometimes people feel like, well, we can go out and leave our kids at home. Well, yes, you can, because you're
Mhm.
modeling marriage for your kids. And I think it's so important to keep that in mind. And so you want your kids to have date nights when they're married.
Yeah.
And so it's okay. And so you want to have a good model there, and you want them to know that marriage is a priority for
Mhm.
you guys. And this is, they're a very important part of your life, but marriage is the primary relationship here.
Mhm.
Doesn't negate anything as kids. And so thinking about that, what you're modeling for them, and then, just okay, if you set this goal of what your marriage is going to look like, what is that? How does that play out? Make sure you get it practical. That you're gonna
Mhm.
say connect every day. We're gonna have our date nights. We're gonna
Mhm.
have trips alone. We're gonna parent together, and I think that's huge. I think sometimes I see
Mhm.
parents that just parent differently, and they never get on the same page, and
Yeah.
so not only are they not connecting during that time, they're sending kind of mixed messages to their kids. Well, but when you parent together, there's just a connection that happens there. It's
Mm.
like, yeah, we're on the same page with this.
Mhm.
And we're doing the things that we think are best for our kids, those kind of things. As you problem solve together instead of just pointing the finger at each other. As
Mhm.
you pray together, all of those kind of things are steps that help grow your marriage and continue to do that in the second half. And I think a lot of the purpose of the book, and sometimes I wish we had retitled a little bit, because the book is really to help you be more prepared when you get to that second half.
Mm.
Now, you can
Mhm.
use the book in the second half to get there. I mean, it's never too late, because we
Yeah.
have a God that loves us, cares for us, wants your marriage to be the very best it can be. And
Mhm.
so it's never too late. But the earlier you start thinking about those things,
Mhm.
the easier that transition is going to be. And I
Yeah.
think more of what you would want and what God would want for you
Yeah.
in
No,
that.
that's good. That's a really good piece of encouragement because I think there probably would be people listening who are thinking ahead, but then there are probably people listening who are thinking, oh, shoot, we're there and we didn't even think about it and we're kind of struggling. But you're right. It's never too late. And
Yeah.
wherever you are, there are things you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And just know that God wants that for you, I think. And then
Yes.
involving Him in it, that I think you do have hope and
Yeah.
things can be different. And I think couples do that. I
Mm-hmm.
had a couple that I counseled a few years ago, and she came in and she said, the kids left. We've been about 8 years without it. I just don't think he wants to be married anymore. We're
Hmm.
just and everything. And so I said, what does he think? She goes, well, I never asked him. And I said, okay, your homework this week is to go and ask him.
Yeah.
And she did. And he got, oh no, I want our marriage. I want to do
Wow.
things. And it was a turning point for them,
Wow.
but somebody had to, it just wasn't happening. And
Right.
so they began to work on things. Last time I talked to them, I mean, they were loving life
Wow.
together, but that they needed a spark to kind of get them going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's such a great example too. Because
Yeah.
I feel like there are a lot of times where there is some low hanging fruit. A lot of times.
Yes,
Uh-huh. Yeah. So
absolutely.
we've talked about a lot of great kind of broad ideas of like having some vision, having some intentionality, taking some steps. So let's make it a little more practical. Let's break it down more. So if you're ready to practically improve your marriage in the second half, where would you tell listeners to start as a first step to grow stronger in the second half, wherever they are today?
I think the first step has got to be that conversation of together of what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Like in anything, you've got to make that commitment together.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think, sometimes I'll talk to couples and they say, well, we don't have fun together anymore. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do for fun before you got married?
Mm-hmm.
Or giving them some ideas of, okay, if we're committed to do this, let's make sure we have our date nights. Let's make,
Mm-hmm.
things that we've talked about, make sure we're doing all this stuff. But I really think the first step is really committing to do that, and then kind of brainstorm. I mean, you're married, there's things that work for all marriages, but
Mhm.
there's also a uniqueness about each marriage.
Mhm.
And maybe you say, remember the early years of our marriage that we would do this, and remember how close that brought us? Let's
Hmm.
start doing that again. You bring out something that maybe from your past that you think
Mhm.
about work. Like for us, Nancy would always do really special things. And every time she would do something like that for us, I think I've told the story before, but when we built our first house, we'd only been married about 3 years. We built this whole house and the foundation was poured. And Nancy said, let's meet at the house and see what they're doing. Well, I got there and she had a picnic laid out on the slab. And, something like that
Mhm.
really, it just showed me, one, that she was intentional,
Mhm.
two, that she was a way that she was showing love, and I loved it. It just made me feel so close to her that she did things like that. And so
Mhm.
I think there's things that we do that we just kind of like quit doing or quit being creative about it, and sometimes
Yeah.
we just get lazy, you know
Mhm.
and so I think it's kind of a jump start. And so I think both of you making that commitment to grow your marriage during and now or in the second half to prepare for that, whichever it
Mhm.
is, that I think is the huge first step, is saying
Yeah.
let's do this, and then you kind of begin to put the pieces together.
Mhm. Yeah, that's so good. That's really good. That's a great starting place, and anybody can do that today is
Yeah,
kind of get that conversation going.
well, and I think too, I mean, I should have said it, but put God in the middle of it. Pray, say,
Mhm.
God, we don't think we've got the marriage you want for us. We
Mm.
don't think we're preparing well for that second half. We're in our second half, and it's not going very well. And
Mhm.
and just ask God in the middle of it, and you'll be amazed what He does. He'll
Mhm.
prompt you. He'll give you ideas. He'll bring people around, or you may hear a message at church
Mhm.
that you hear very differently because
Mhm.
you've been praying that prayer. And so yeah, involving Him into it and making that commitment together, it's going to give you a big jump start on getting where you want your marriage to go.
That's good. That's really good. What else would you say to do if they're not feeling the connection? What's another?
I think Christian counseling,
Mhm.
it is never a bad, I always feel like, okay, you're a Christian counselor. You always say that, but I think it works. I've been doing it for 40 years.
Absolutely.
Because a counselor can kind of help you get going.
Yeah.
He or she can help you. Maybe there's some issues that are kind of holding you back or
Yeah.
both of you back. And so that counselor can help you identify and work through those things, because sometimes you get into that and you think, okay, we got a great plan here, and you come into a barrier that you really didn't expect. And
Yeah.
maybe it's from something that happened in the past. Maybe it predates even your relationship. But whatever it
Mhm.
is, it's going to inhibit you from having the marriage that you want. And so that
Mhm.
counselor can help you identify that or work through that and
Yeah.
resolve that, whether it's between the two of you or something for one of you that's kind of holding you back. And the other thing, I think mentor couples are great. Nancy and
Mhm.
I were so blessed that we had so many people that poured into us. And so that was huge for us.
Mhm.
Finding a mentor couple, someone that's just a stage ahead of you, usually is going to
Mhm.
be really good, because maybe their kids are teenagers and yours are little. Maybe their kids are gone and you're working toward that and trying to get
Mhm.
ready for the second half. And you look at them and you think, I think they're doing a good job in second half. Let's
Mhm.
see if they'll have lunch with us. Something
Yeah.
like that. And just learn from them.
Mhm.
It's kind of funny, we always sought out people, and now it's weird when people seek us out.
Mhm.
It's like,
Mhm.
because we're still looking to think, we don't have anything to share with them, and just like,
Dr. Kim,
why?
you and Nancy have the most to
No,
share.
but
Come
but
on.
we don't. We just feel like, what are we doing? And it's like every time we feel like we learn more from them. And so, anyway, I think finding a good mentor couple, and if you're looking for one, ask your pastor.
Yeah.
Your pastor may know, someone may have come to them and say, hey, we would love to mentor a couple younger than us.
Yeah.
And so explore your resources there. I think that
Yeah.
can be really helpful.
And I think if you have a couple in your church or who you know that you do look up to, I think that you can just ask him. You don't have to make it formal. Mentorship doesn't have to be a
No,
program, but you can just say, hey, we'd love to get some lunch and hear how you've handled this or that. It
yeah.
does, don't overcomplicate it.
And then if you think it was helpful, say, can we do this again next month?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
sure. Buy their lunch.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Buy
Yeah.
their lunch.
They're helping you out.
Yes,
So
buy their
yeah,
lunch. Yep,
exactly.
exactly.
Totally. No, that's good. And I think it's funny because I agree, Brian's been in ministry for 22 years. We've been married for
Wow.
21 and a half years. And, we had to get over that feeling quickly of like, we have nothing to share, but we were in college ministry and you realize quickly, as soon as you're out of college, you have some some experience that people in college haven't got yet. And so
Absolutely.
even though it is the blind leading the blind, but it's still, if you're a step ahead, you can help somebody. And the great thing about that is you don't have to have any special knowledge. All you have to do is be willing to say, hey, I don't know much, but here's what I see. Here's what's helped me. And it's kind of funny because it's like you said, it's simple stuff. It's not
Yeah.
easy. It's hard. It's all hard, but it's simple. But it's helpful just to have that encouragement in that community aspect of it.
Yeah, if you've got a newborn, find somebody that their baby's 6 months old or a
Yeah.
year,
Yeah.
because things are so different, like all the
Yes.
time. And seeing my granddaughter with her baby and just realizing back how quickly they change and
Oh my.
things that that you deal with.
Yes.
And so just talking to somebody just a little bit ahead of you on that can be and for a couple, hey,
Mhm.
you realize, hey, our sex life is kind of waning. And so you talk to a
Mhm.
couple that maybe their kid is almost a year old. How did y'all navigate that?
Mhm.
Just some input from somebody else can make such a difference.
Yeah. And nobody's going to be perfect. Don't look for a
No,
perfect one. That doesn't exist. It just doesn't.
no,
I've
no,
tried. I've
no,
tried looking.
no, no, that doesn't.
It doesn't. Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. So what are some of the things, Dr. Kim, that have helped you and Nancy the most because you guys have such a fun marriage. You have such a good time together. And what are the things that have helped you get there in the second half?
I think that we've always had fun together.
Mhm.
And I think we've kept that alive. We love to laugh together. We love to
Mhm.
explore new things together. I think just having fun together has been such an important part of our marriage. And
Mhm.
sometimes it's planned, something we
Mhm.
do, and sometimes it's just spontaneous. But I think just if you're not having fun in your marriage, work on that. Work on that because it's a great connector. I
Mhm.
think some other things that have helped us, I talked about, but we have some people that really poured into us. Our first pastor would come and hang out with us
Mm.
at our apartment in our house, and just I didn't realize what he was doing then, but he was encouraging us. He
Mm.
was valuing us. He was building us into people, helping build us into people that he later said, I'd like you to take this role in the church. I'd like
Mm.
you to take this role in the church. That
Mhm.
was huge. He was
Mhm.
such a blessing to us. And he, after we had fun with him. And then when we were young, married in that church, so many people reached out to us, and we were
Wow.
so blessed of the people who just encouraged us. Or we used to have these church dinners, and there's this one lady that knew I liked this chocolate cream pie she made, and she would always set aside 2 pieces for Nancy and I.
That is
Just
so sweet.
and she'd tell other people, and now it's all gone. But then we get, it just made you feel special.
Yeah.
And my parents were a huge influence on us. They kind of the model for awesome marriage for us.
Mhm.
Counseling, when we went to counseling, made a huge difference for us. I think it helped us. I think we knew what our goal was. Well, like we've talked about, we wanted.
Mhm.
We had no idea to get there, and we were really kind of
Mhm.
destroying each other while trying to get there.
Yeah.
That was a huge thing. Taking divorce off the table was a huge thing.
Mhm.
Praying together was a huge thing. And then I think the fact of personalizing our relationship with God together, that He does have a plan for our marriage, and it's a good plan, and He wants to use us for His kingdom. And so
Mhm.
those kind of things, people, some of the decisions we made, having fun together, and just valuing each season. I think that was one of the things that we did really well. When our kids
Mhm.
were little, we tried to, I saw people saying, oh my gosh, our kids will never get out of diapers, life will change. So we just tried to enjoy every season, even the
Yeah.
diapers, but Nancy did change most of them. I was so good about disappearing when
Oh
I,
my
when
gosh.
I, when I smelled something. And, so anyway, but yeah, and then the kids, we just tried to really enjoy them, and at the same time be intentional about your marriage. And you can do both. And
Mhm.
it may mean that you have to change your kid's schedule a bit. Maybe they
Yeah.
can't do 7 different sports at a time,
Mhm.
and it's okay if they don't,
Yeah.
you know. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was listening to Kurt Herbstreit, which I admire a lot. He's a football analyst, all that kind of, most people know who Kurt is. And so he was just saying that, I totally lost what he said.
Oh no.
What did he say? Oh, I'll scratch all that.
Oh no. I was excited to hear what he said. I thought it was going to be
Right.
really good.
What was I going with
It's
that?
about kids sports. They can't do all of them.
Oh yeah, yeah. And so I was listening to Kurt, and he has 3 kids, 3 boys that have all played college sports. He said, and they're good, but they're not going
Mm.
to play major league sports. And they give the stat on each major league sport of the percentage of kids that get there, and it's almost a miracle if your kid gets there.
Wow. Uh-huh.
Because so many things has to fall into place
Yeah.
and be
Yeah.
there for it. And so I think we can buy in, especially where a lot of us live, where sports are so much focus,
Yeah.
and you get caught up in this thing of like, I remember this coach that Grant had one time as a soccer coach when he was in 8th grade, and he was trying to get us to do all these things, and he says, well, the World Cup's going to be here in so many years, and your kid can play
What?
in the World Cup. And I'm
Oh
going,
my gosh.
and some of the parents are going, yes, yes. I'm going, no, no, no. Plus, he loves
Uh,
baseball more than he loves soccer. So,
Such wishful thinking.
yeah. So I think
Wow.
it's great to want your kids to do the best. But I think a guy taught me this at a young age. The boy, he was a co-coach with me, and the boys were 8, and we won the city championship. And we were all celebrating. And then we were talking about, he went to church, and I was telling somebody about it. And he said, yeah, they're the champions of their known world. And I think valuing that
Hmm.
if they excel or enjoy or have fun playing in the world that they're in right now,
Hmm.
that's great.
Yeah.
And if they progress, great. But if
Yeah.
they don't, that's okay too. And you don't want to sacrifice your marriage to try to make a major leaguer.
Right.
You
Right. And
know,
I mean, I've seen it, I've seen couples who sacrificed thousands upon thousands of dollars, spent every weekend apart. And then the kid, as soon as they got to college, was like, I'm burnt out.
yes,
And there goes that dream. It's dead. And what do you have to show for it? I mean, I agree. It's fun to watch your kids. It's fun to watch them
that's
succeed.
so good.
And if you got a kid with a lot of energy, it's a great outlet. Like, come on, let's get
Yeah,
him out there and have fun. You become friends with all the other parents. And so if you disrupt that, then you're disrupting a lot. But you have to look ahead a little bit at the end goal here. And I think that's where there's a missing piece a lot of times.
I think there is, and I
Hmm.
think a lot of times it's the parents pushing more than the kid.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like I wanted, like Grant was a good baseball player. He did get to go to college on a baseball scholarship to a small school, but it was like we didn't do a lot of things that other families did. Now, if Grant
Yeah.
said, "Hey, Dad, I'm not. Can I get a hitting coach for a while?" Sure. So
Hmm.
we'll get you a hitting coach for a while.
Hmm.
But it wasn't like we were just like, okay, you got to go to this camp here and that camp
Right.
here, this, that, all that
Right.
kind of. And I'm not being critical of people listening, going, "Oh, we're doing all that stuff." Just don't let it be at the expense of your marriage and your family. And I think
Hmm.
that's where it gets in trouble. And if God wants him to be a major league player, he'll be a major league player.
Yeah. Yeah.
Trust God with it. Trust God with his
Yes.
development or her development. Sorry,
And
I
and
can
if
say her
if
too.
if God doesn't, it's because he has something better for them in mind, something
Yes.
better. Yeah.
Well, I think it was, my pastor was a baseball player, good baseball player, was injured where he couldn't play anymore,
Mm.
took up tennis. That brought him to Oklahoma City University, played on the tennis team. For there, God humbled him, and now he leads Life Church.
Wow.
And I think I've heard Craig tell that story. It's like he thought his life was ending
Yeah.
when he got hurt in baseball,
Yeah.
and God did have something so much more for him.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
so don't get. I've always tried to not get in God's way. I,
Hmm.
I'm not always successful at that, but I do trust Him more than I trust myself.
Yeah. That's a great lesson to learn, and sometimes a really hard one.
A really hard lesson.
I feel like that, that was a little bit of a sidetrack of I didn't know we were going to be talking about kids sports here, but I do think it's super relevant to this topic because as you're approaching that what we're kind of trying to define as the second half of marriage, that's where this stuff's getting really active, where it can kind of
Yes.
take over your life. And I just feel like we've always been very, very intentional. I'm really blessed that Brian is very good at vision casting and holding. I'm just here. You know what I mean? I don't think
Yeah.
ahead about anything, but that's why we're a great pairing, but it's also why it brings friction. But he's been really good at saying, okay, we have to look at where this would take us, where this would lead
Yeah.
us
Yeah.
if we were to do this. And so that kept us from signing up for a lot of whims that I might have tried to chase down because it's like, well, what's the point? Where's it taking us? What would it do for our family, our marriage? And from that vantage point, we've been able to see differently when a lot of people around us get caught up in it and roll along and then end up in this place where it's just kind of drained a lot of the time,
Yeah.
resources, the relationship. And so that's really pertinent to the second half of marriage conversation.
Absolutely. I think it is. And I think it's, I had a couple that came to my mind when we were talking about this, that they had a couple of kids that were very involved in soccer. And so they did, but they made a decision, we're going to do this for this season. And so
Sure.
they
Yeah.
did. He would go, they'd take turns going with different ones because they were
Mhm.
on teams and stuff. But they also did family devotionals. They also
Mhm.
did other family things. They also were intentional about their marriage.
Mhm.
And I think if you do it that way and you do it for a season, I mean, I'm not criticizing that at all,
Mhm.
but I think you always want to continue to evaluate it. Okay, we did
Right.
that this year for this season. Do we want to do it again next year? What do the kids
Mhm.
want to do? Maybe they're said, I'm tired of traveling for
Mhm.
soccer. Okay, great. What do you want to do? Well,
Mhm.
I'd rather just work out, get stronger. Great, do that.
Yeah.
You know, just kind of evaluate it and always, I think, as best you can, let the kids know that whatever they decide is fine with you. I
Yeah.
do believe when you start something, you need to finish. You need to finish that
Mhm.
season.
Mhm.
But after that, you've taught them how to make a commitment and follow through with it. And then
Mhm.
if they say, I'm done with this, great.
Yeah.
And so it always evaluate it. How's it
Mhm.
affecting your child? How's it affecting your family? How's it affecting your marriage?
Yeah.
And if none of those are negative, then probably need to make some adjustments.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
And you can.
absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I think that it does fall in because I think that's such a part of our lives. So many of
Mhm.
us, as our kids get older, and it may not always be sports. It might be.
Sure.
Had kids that were musical, and they would travel everywhere for
Mhm.
whatever those kind of things. And
Mhm.
it's not contest. I know there's there's a great word that describes what that
Yeah.
is. I don't know it. So yeah, it can be anything. It could be anything like that. A family that their son was on the debate team
Mm.
and got on the state debate team and then was on a national debate team. Well,
Wow.
at probably at the end of his junior year, he said, I don't want to debate anymore.
Hmm.
And they were smart enough to talk through it with him, make sure it wasn't just, whatever.
Yeah.
My girlfriend broke up with me because I'm in debate. No,
Right.
something. But they allowed him to do that,
Mhm.
or they supported him in doing that, and but also helped him in, okay, you're not going to debate. What do you want to do your senior year that you think would be just fulfilling for you and help you
Yeah.
grow, something like that.
Yeah. That's
So
good.
yeah, I don't want to always put it just in sports because
No.
that was such a part of our lives because there's many things that parents deal with in different areas that their
Mhm.
kids get into.
Oh yeah. 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 If you've ever had a child in musical theater, those
Yeah.
rehearsals are all the time. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
there's
I had a
plenty of
couple.
stuff.
Yeah, we just had some friends that they went through that. Yeah, they're a younger couple that went through that, and oh my gosh, I didn't even
Mhm.
realize that. I didn't realize what till I worked with a family whose son was in the high school band.
Mhm.
What
Oh
they
yeah.
do that they spent more time
Yes.
on that field than the football players did.
You're not joking. Yeah, that's
And,
true.
so you've got all
Mhm.
those things that, again, are great. And I think if you can look at it's just for a season, and we do
Mhm.
make sacrifices for our kids,
Mhm.
but we want to make sure it doesn't affect our marriage or our family in a negative way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's important.
Yeah.
That's important. Well, Dr. Kim, we've covered a lot in this conversation. It's been really helpful. What's your final piece of advice for our listeners today?
Kind of what we just reiterate what we said earlier. If you're not in the second half yet, and you feel like, man, this touched some things, we're not preparing very well for this.
Mhm.
Make your plan. Set your
Mhm.
goals. What are we going to do different? What connects us? What used to connect us? Get some of our resources, Awesome Marriage. Go on our research tab on that website. There are all kinds of things that can help you
Yeah.
grow in your marriage. And if you're in it and you're just sitting around not talking to each other and you've watched everything Netflix has put out and you're starting back through again, look at each other and say, hey, let's make this second half, let's go a different direction with this.
Mhm.
There's always time to change. You have a God that's going to help you change. And I don't think that's a decision you'll ever regret.
Yeah.
You'll reap the benefits of it day after day after day.
That's so true. That's so true. And that's just a great encouraging word for us to end on. So take whatever you heard Dr. Kim say today that you need to work on. You know what it is. Take it to heart and do it. And if you want to grab a copy of his book, Love, Intimacy, and Sex in the Second Half, that will be available at the link in today's show notes, as well as his daily one thing email or his weekly marriage multiplier email. Yeah, Dr. Kim is busy. He writes a lot. But this is all here just to help make this conversation practical and helpful for you in your marriage. So thanks so much for spending your time with us today. I hope this conversation's been helpful. Let us know what you think by emailing info@awesomemarriage.com. We always love to hear from you. Otherwise, we'll see you here next week. Have a great day and do something awesome for your marriage today.